before the flags, before men called themselves Igbo, Igala, or Benin, there was simply people. People guided by rhythm, by stars, by faith, and by memory. Every civilization is born from a question. Where did we come from? In West Africa's heart, that question hums through the red soil and the palm groves, valleys of the Anambra River, across the floodplains of Ida, down to the royal city of Benin. 3 tongues, 1 mystery. Could they share an origin? Covenant carried by ancient travelers long before history began to write itself.
Oral tradition tells us of a man named Eri, a stranger from the east, who settled near the great river and laid the first stone of what would become near the spiritual cradle of the Igbo world. Yet, among the Igala of Ida, there are stories of a kindred ancestor, a man whose laws mirrored those of Eri, whose symbols and rituals spoke the same sacred language. And in Benin, far to the west, the royal priests tell of visitors from across the waters, men who carried white chalk and spoke of a God of truth and peace. Were these coincidences or traces of an unbroken bloodline? To answer, we must walk backwards through time, through myths, migrations, and memory. Archaeology gives us fragments, pottery, relics, bronze. Linguistics gives us echoes, shared words like Oba, Attah, Eze. But only the stories preserved in the hearts of elders give us soul. The elders say there was once a brotherhood, sons of one patriarch, who journeyed westward seeking the land of peace promised to their fathers. They settled where rivers meet, where spirits walk, and where truth would dwell among men. From that seed grew the triad of nations Igbo, Igala, and Benin, branches of one sacred tree. But how did these bonds fade? What wars, migrations, or politics tore them apart? This is the mystery that myth and mystery now seeks to unfold, not to rewrite history, but to remember it. Join us as we trace the forgotten path of Eri's descendants. From the mound of Aguleri to the throne of Ida and into the bronze courts of Benin, we follow the whispers of a covenant older than kingdoms. The descent of Eri, the covenant of light. The story begins not in Africa, but far beyond the Nile, where the desert touches the edge of heaven. The elders of Aguleri say that long ago, when the world was still young, a messenger descended from the east, a man of wisdom and fire. His name was Eri, son of Gad, grandson of Jacob, whom men called Israel. He was said to be chosen a bearer of an ancient covenant, instructed to seek a new land where peace would rule and truth would be law. Eri journeyed with his brothers and cousins, guided by visions of a shining mound and a river that whispered the name of Chukwu, the supreme creator. They crossed sands, mountains, and the great Nile, a migration not of conquest, but of faith. Among them were men whose descendants would later be remembered as Attah, Oba, and Eze, titles that would echo through Igala, Benin, and Igbo lands like a song split into 3 harmonies. When they reached the confluence, where rivers meet what we now call the Niger and Benue, Eri stood still. He looked upon the land and said, "Here, the earth is alive. Here, the covenant will breathe again." There, he built the first altar of white clay, Eri Obu, laws that would become the foundation of Omenala, the Igbo moral code. Aries' teaching spoke of truth, eziokwu, purity, and peace, udo. The same values still echo today in Igala words for holiness and in the Benin use of white chalk or hue as a symbol of purity. From these shared symbols, one begins to see not coincidence but memory. His companions began to settle in nearby lands. One followed the current northward, his line would give birth to the Igala. Another turned west toward the forests, his blood would flow in the Benin royal house. And Eri remained near the Anambra to nurture the spiritual heart of the covenant. The three families parted like rivers from one spring separate in course, yet joined at the source. In the generations that followed, the sons of Eri would establish the kingdom of Nir, a realm where the king was not a warrior, but a priest. His crown was humility, his weapon, truth. The Igala would rise in Ida, building a throne upon justice and kinship, while the Benin people would shape bronze and ritual into an empire of artistry and spirit. Three nations each bearing a spark of the same fire. But as time flowed, the memory of their brotherhood began to fade. Languages changed, kingdoms grew, and pride divided what ancestry had once joined. Yet in the festivals, the symbols, and the prayers whispered to the same Creator, the old covenant still spoke softly, patiently, waiting to be remembered. Waiting to be remembered. This was the beginning of the great triad, Eri, Attah, and Oba. A story written not on paper, but in the blood and faith of millions. The birth of the NRI order. When heaven met the earth, when Eri's feet touched the red earth of Anambra, he did not come merely to settle. He came to plant heaven into the soil of men. The people say that the earth itself recognized him, that the land spoke, saying, "You have found the ground where truth will never die." And so began the first foundation of the Nuri civilization, a kingdom unlike any other, where the ruler was not chosen by the sword, but by the spirit. Eri's son, Nuri, inherited not just his father's blood, but his covenant. He was ordained as the first Eze Nuri, a priest king whose duty was to keep the people in harmony with Chukwu, the Most High God. The Neri did not conquer, they cleansed. Wherever blood was unjustly spilled, Ni priests were sent to purify the land, wash away guilt, and restore peace. Their mission was to heal the earth, for they believed that every wrong act polluted the land and angered the spirits. It was from this sacred philosophy that Omenala, the Igbo moral code, blossomed. A system where truth, eziokwu, peace, udo, and justice, ikpe, were divine obligations, not human inventions. The Igala, too, preserved this order in their own way. Their kings, the Attahs, ruled not as tyrants, but as custodians of balance, mirroring the priestly rule of the Neri. In both lands, the monarch was both spiritual and temporal, a mediator between men and God. But perhaps the most fascinating connection lies to the west in Benin. While Eri's line settled around the Anambra, his brother's descendants traveled deeper into the forests. there, they merged with earlier settlers, bringing with them a knowledge of priestly governance and sacred artistry. The Benin Oba, like the near priest, was considered divine, a bridge between heaven and earth. The use of white chalk, or hue, to symbolize purity, and bronze altars depicting ancestral spirits, both mirror the ancient rituals of Ni. These were not coincidences of culture, but echoes of memory, fragments of a single origin, scattered by time. The Eze Nuri, Attah of Igala, and Oba of Benin all inherited different aspects of that first divine commission. Nri preserved spiritual law and purification. Igala preserved justice and kingship. Benin preserved ritual and artistry. 3 brothers, 3 thrones, 1 spirit. A trinity of civilization rooted in a single descent, the house of Eri, son of God, son of Israel. Through their customs, the covenant continued even as their tongues diverged, even as centuries passed. The Nair believed that no man truly died, that the ancestors lived on in the air, the trees, the rivers, and the conscience of the living. And that is why every Igbo village keeps a sacred space, a shrine, an offal, a place of truth, because it is said that the spirit of Eri still walks, guarding the covenant of light, the split of the kingdoms. When blood became borders, every story of light eventually meets its shadow. For centuries, the sons of Eri, Gad's lineage, lived in quiet harmony, joined by shared symbols and laws that bound heaven to earth. But time, as always, does not keep memories safe. With each generation, the story of their brotherhood faded like a name written on wet clay. The kingdom of Neri grew in wisdom and fame. No, not for war, but for purity. The Attah of Igala, up north, began to expand his influence along the riverbanks, trading and intermarrying with the peoples of Kogi and Lokoja. And to the west, the Benin Empire awakened a people of bronze and flame, crafting images of gods and kings that would outlive centuries. Though descended from one covenant, the 3 houses began to look upon one another as strangers. Oral traditions tell of a time when disputes rose over land, tribute, and pride. The Igala sent emissaries to Nuri for counsel, but Nuri priests, bound by their vow of nonviolence, refused to take sides. The Benin kings, meanwhile, began to consolidate power through conquest and trade, forging an empire that would stretch to the sea. This was the beginning of separation. Faith turned to politics, blood turned to borders. Yet beneath the differences, the echoes of their shared ancestry remained. The Benin used chalk or hue in coronations, a symbol of purity also found in Nuri rituals. The Igala revered Ida as a holy city by the river, much like Nuri regarded the Obu god at Aguleri. And among the Igbo, the oldest families of Eri, Nir, and Aguleri continued to guard sacred relics, said to have come from the east, some claim, even from Egypt or Canaan.
3 peoples, 3 dialects, 1 idea. Man is a reflection of the divine. The Igbo say, unikwi, chia ekwi, when one agrees, their spirit agrees. The Igala say, che bijo, the spirit stands by you. In both, destiny is a dialogue between man and God, not fate, but relationship. The Forgotten Code of Eri. The laws and mysteries of the covenant. Every civilization is built on law, but not all laws are written. Long before scrolls or tablets, long before kings carved decrees in stone, there was a living code passed by word, by ritual, by the conscience of the heart. The Igbo call it omenala, the customs of the land. The Igala call it ichibo, the sacred order. The Benin call it yuan, the laws of purity. 3 names, 1 law. The Code of Eri. Eri's covenant with Chukwu, the supreme creator, was not about conquest, it was about balance. He taught that life must remain in harmony. The heavens with the earth, the spirits with the living, man with his neighbor. When harmony was broken, the land itself would rebel, crops would fail, floods would come, or disease would strike. So the people learned, to sin against truth was to offend the earth. 1. The law of purity, and so Allah. Eri's first law declared that no one must defile the land. Allah, the earth goddess who bore witness to every oath. To kill unjustly, to steal, or to bear false witness was not merely a crime, it was an abomination, so Allah, awound upon creation itself. When such sin occurred, the NRI priests were called, not to punish, but to cleanse. They would perform rituals of purification, offer white chalk, and restore peace between man and earth. Among the Igala, the same idea existed: a land could be angry, Iluojo, and the Attah would order sacrifices to restore balance. In Benin, the Oryu ritual served the same role: white chalk offered to appease the gods when purity was broken. Across 3 kingdoms, one invisible law governed all. Purity is peace. 2. The law of truth, Eziakwa Bundu. The second law of the covenant was truth, Eziakwa Biyundu, truth is life. Eri taught that lies poison not just the speaker but the community. Every word carried spiritual weight, every oath a bond with heaven. The Ofo staff, still used in Igbo tradition today, symbolized this truth. It was said to burn any hand that bore falsehood. The Igala held a similar symbol, the Okwut, a sacred stone of judgment. And in Benin, truth was personified by Osa Nogojua, the god who sees all things. To the descendants of Eri, truth was not optional, it was divine law. Without truth, man is cut off from the Creator.
Over centuries, languages diverged. NRI's influence waned as new Igbo clans rose in trade and warfare. Igala's power reached its peak under the mighty Attah Iegba Oma Idoko, who united the kingdom against external invasions.
And Benin, under Oba Uwar the Great, became one of the most sophisticated city-states in pre-colonial Africa. The 3 pillars of the covenant stood tall, but apart. It was as though destiny itself wished to hide their link. Perhaps to test if the children of Eri would one day remember. The traders and travelers who moved between these kingdoms began to tell stories. That the Igala and Igbo shared the same word for spirit, Nuo. That Benin's rituals of purification echoed those of the NRI. That their ancient drums beat to similar rhythms, though no one knew why. In time, the foreign invaders came: Portuguese, then British. They saw 3 different nations and recorded them as such. But they did not know they were looking upon brothers. Colonization deepened the divide. Missionaries labeled the old religion pagan, erasing centuries of spiritual identity. The sacred sites of Eri were neglected, the oral history of the Igala forgotten, the spiritual symbols of Benin turned into museum pieces far from home. What had once been one story became 3, each incomplete, each missing the other's voice. Yet the bloodline of Gad, through Eri, never disappeared. The Igbo still speak of Chukwu, the Most High. The Igala still call upon Ojo, the Supreme One. The Benin still honor Osanobwa, the Eternal Creator.
3 names, 1 meaning. 3 nations, 1 source. As the dust of centuries settles, the truth begins to whisper again. That before these kingdoms stood apart, they once stood together. That the covenant of light, born in the hands of Eri, still flows like a river beneath the soil of West Africa. Perhaps, the day will come when the sons and daughters of Igbo, Igala, and Benin will remember. Not just who they became, but who they were. Echoes of the covenant. Traces of the lost brotherhood in modern times. Centuries have passed since the sons of Eri walked the same road. The kingdoms have changed, the languages have evolved, and empires have risen and fallen. Yet the land still remembers. In the rhythm of the drums, in the words of prayers, and in the silent symbols carved on ancient stones, the covenant still breathes. If one listens closely, echoes of their brotherhood can still be found, not in bloodlines written on paper, but in the patterns of spirit and culture that endure. 1. The shared words of spirit. Across the lands of Igbo, Igala, and Benin, certain words whisper the same meaning, ancient words that predate colonization or contact. Among the Igbo, chi means the personal spirit, the divine spark within. Among the Igala, che, or chi bears the same sound, the guardian spirit. Among the Benin, Osanobwa is the universal source of all spirits.
3. The law of sacred blood. The third law governed the use of blood, the mystery of life itself. Eri forbade unnecessary killing and human sacrifice, declaring that no innocent blood must touch the earth unjustly. But over generations, as new kingdoms rose, this commandment became twisted. In Benin, ritual blood was later used to sanctify royal altars. In Igala and Igbo lands, animal sacrifices remained symbolic echoes of Eri's original offerings. Yet the intention was always the same, to honor the life force that flowed from God into man. Some elders say Eri taught that every man carried divine fire, chi, the God seed within. To spill innocent blood was to extinguish that flame. This is why the Znri was forbidden to witness violence or warfare, his very eyes were sacred. 4. The law of the ancestors. Eri's code also bound the living to the dead. He taught that ancestors were not gone, they were the roots of the living tree. Offerings, prayers, and remembrance kept the spiritual world aligned with the physical. The Igbo built Ndi-Ichi shrines, ancestral altars. The Igala maintained Okwodo-Jiji, sacred stones to honor the forebears. The Benin cast bronze heads, eternal memorials of their ancestors. These were not mere symbols, they were living links in a spiritual network that stretched across centuries. Every libation poured, every name called, every festival held, was a renewal of the covenant. As long as the ancestors were honored, the land would remain at peace. 2. The triad of sacred leadership. The spiritual thrones of Znri, Attah Igala, and Oba Benin still carry echoes of that original covenant leadership bound to purity, justice, and ritual. In Nri, the East does not wage war, he purifies it. In Ida, the Attah is not just a ruler, he is a priest, custodian of divine law. In Benin, the Oba is seen as a living link between ancestors and the living. Each one, in their own way, performs the role of mediator, the same role Eri himself was said to have played between heaven and earth. These thrones stand as fragments of one divine design, separated by geography but united in meaning. 3. Symbols that never died. In Nri, the white chalk, Nzu, represents truth and peace. In Benin, Oryu, the same white chalk, symbolizes purity and goodwill. Among the Igala, Iko, or I, a sacred white clay, marks divine presence during royal rituals. Across these lands, white is not just a color, it is the symbol of the covenant itself. It is light in matter, spirit in clay, heaven touching the earth. When an elder breaks kola nut, when libation is poured, when the first harvest is blessed, they are unknowingly repeating the gestures of their ancestors, who learned it first from Eri's altar. 4. The hidden migrations. Archaeological and linguistic evidence hint at an ancient east-to-west migration pattern. From the Anambra Basin to the Ida riverbank, and further west to the Benin Plains. Pottery fragments, bronze work, and oral genealogies trace patterns that seem too connected to be coincidence. The craftsmanship of Benin bronze resembles early NRI ritual items. The sacred Igala drum bears inscriptions found in early Igbo Akwu bronzes. It is as if the same artistic spirit flowed through three hands, reshaping form, but keeping the same rhythm. Could it be that when Eri's brothers left his camp near the Great River, they carried not just memory, but blueprints of culture? The gods they served, Chukwu, Ojo, Osinobwa, may have worn different names, but their essence was one. 5. Faith rediscovered. In today's Nigeria, scholars, priests, and storytellers are beginning to reunite the fragments. Pilgrims still visit Agulari, where the mound of Eri, Obu Gad, stands as a sacred testimony. From Ida, priests of Igala still perform rites that invoke their ancestors by the river. And in Benin, the palace ceremonies still honor the ancestors in rituals older than any colonial record. Our fathers did not forget, he says. They only buried the truth beneath their daily lives. The covenant is not gone, it is sleeping, waiting to be remembered. The world may call them different tribes, but in the silence of ancestry, they remain brothers of one descent, keepers of the same divine promise. And so, the story whispers again through the winds of the Niger Valley, reminding those who listen that before the kingdoms were named, before the rivers were divided, there was one family, one faith, and one light that still glows in three nations. 5. The Law of Destiny, Chi-na-Ik. The final law was destiny, the mystery of Chi and Ik. Eri taught that every soul was created with a divine pattern, a spiritual assignment. In Igbo thought, this became Chi-na-Ik, creation and purpose intertwined. The Igala call it Che, the guiding spirit. The Benin say Ehai, a personal guardian that reports to Osinobwa. All three traditions speak of the same truth. That destiny is not chosen, it is remembered. To know one's Chi, Che, or Ehai is to walk in divine harmony. To ignore it is to lose one's place in creation. And so, the Code of Eri, the ancient covenant, survives not in books or scrolls, but in the daily life of millions. In the way an elder prays before breaking kola. In the purity of white chalk. In the truth of an oath. In the name of a child given to honor destiny. It is not myth, it is memory. Not fiction, but faith, still breathing beneath the soil of three great nations. The return of the bloodline, rediscovering the true identity of the three nations. Every river eventually returns to the sea, and every bloodline, no matter how scattered, longs to remember where it began. For centuries, the children of Eri walked different paths. The Igbo built kingdoms of trade, knowledge, and innovation. The Igala guarded the mysteries of rulership, their Attah kings tracing descent from divine origins. And the Benin forged one of the most powerful dynasties in all of West Africa, its bronze and ivory whispering stories that time refused to erase. But today, in the light of new understanding, an ancient truth stirs again. The whispers of origin, long buried beneath conquest and colonial rewriting, begin to rise. Across the Niger and Anambra valleys, scholars, priests, and elders are coming together, comparing rituals, languages, and oral histories. The findings are startling. Among the Igbo, the word Is, meaning king, shares its ancient root with Attah among the Igala, both implying divine rulership bestowed by a heavenly ancestor. The Benin word Oba equally carries the sense of appointed by the gods. Three tongues. Three nations.